Hey there, I'm Mark Drager, and this is How to Sell More. What if the biggest thing holding back your sales growth isn't your company's pricing, it's not the products, it's not even the competition? But what if the thing that's killing your growth is actually how your sales team feels about selling? My guest today has uncovered 5 fundamental beliefs that determine whether a salesperson or a sales team is going to be successful or not, even if they are a motivated team.
We've been doing this for over 50 years, and we've trained sales professionals literally all over the world. I mean, millions of people who've been through, and these are things that we have extracted over time. And I think they are essential.
That's Derek Roberts, co-author of Listen to Sell and a sales leadership expert who's spent nearly 3 decades building and coaching high-performance sales teams. And after working with businesses across 130 countries, he's discovered that mindset drives results far more than most people even realize.
I'm a real believer that, beliefs drive behavior. What I believe about myself as a salesperson, what I really believe my job is, and who I am and my own abilities, and do I feel like I'm doing something that's consistent with who I want to be as an individual, right? My values, all those things. What happens before I even engage the customer, there it translates into how I engage that prospect or customer.
Today on How to Sell More, we break down the 5 self-beliefs that will sabotage your team's success. We talk about why boldness can actually backfire if you don't channel it in the right way. And we touch on how top performers use coaching to not only reach, but also stay at their peak potential. So whether you're managing a sales team or you're a business owner who never really even imagined yourself in sales, this conversation will change how you sell and how you lead. Derek, you write, and I'm going to read this as a quote, "Sales is the only profession that seems to be constantly defined by those who do it badly." Oh, that is hard to read. What did you mean by that?
It's kind of a painful line to write because all of us have had really bad sales experiences. Unfortunately, you can go out, man on the street, have the microphone and stop anybody on the corner and say, what comes to mind when we say the word salesperson or something like that? And you get just this litany of really egregious things, selfish and self-serving and aggressive and all these experiences that we all have. And unfortunately, that gets painted across an entire, profession of individuals. And it makes it really difficult for those of us who approach selling in an entirely different way to sort of separate ourselves from that. Doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to stand out. And I think when you do sales really well, you do stand out. But it taints an entire profession because everyone has a story. I mean, sales is prolific, right? All you have to do is need something and you engage someone along the sales chain. And so, unfortunately, that experience permeates all over.
And so I suppose it's no different than the politician or maybe the press. Every year they release these least trustworthy types of positions. And so it's fair to say, listen, there's always bad apples and there's always people who will go out there and take advantage or be self-centered or what have you. But more and more in my world, I imagine in your world, we're aiming to run principled businesses. But in my experience, I'm not coming across people who have been in business for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, who have capital asset heavy organizations, who have invested years and decades into building something great. And then they're not going out there and just ripping people off. So why does this still exist if day by day, the scammers or might be on the internet, you might go to buy a used car and feel like you're getting your arm squeezed. But for the most part, we're all decent people just trying to do our best, no?
Yeah, I totally believe that. And I think that's one of the reasons we put our voice out there and says there is a really high integrity kind of way to sell. And a lot of people out there that do that come out of the gate right at the beginning of the book and make this declaration that salespeople are valuable. And in fact, selling is a noble profession. And we use these words, noble profession, intentionally because we really do believe that there is a high value to the person who connects solutions to needs. And most salespeople that are trying to make a living doing that, I believe, really do want to do it that way. It's consistent and congruent with who they want to be. Sometimes they've not been equipped well to do it. And, they sort of unintentionally stumble into doing some things that do come across to people as being pushy or self-serving or things like that. I don't know, that's even their intent, but it sometimes we just lack the skills or we lack the exposure to a better way of doing it. Certainly, there are a pretty high number of people who bring that kind of integrity to the equation. And yet, there are still so many touch points out there and so many things that we need and so many avenues that we can be associated with that transactional experience that we get lumped in to being inundated with a bot or with somebody who calls us in the middle of dinner or catches us on the street and tries to wrangle us into something. And those things stick, unfortunately, in people's psyche. And so but they're not what I would call professional sales activity, and they don't go to the heart of what we believe really is possible in the sales experience. And I think that's one of the reasons we have a fantastic audience of customers who are hungry to do it the right way. And we've been fortunate to be doing this for about 50 years and have that kind of experience with folks. So, and a business to business profession especially is a great space to do that because you're there really well equipped with knowledge and experience to apply to solving the needs of your customer.
And so if I think about a CEO, an executive, a sales executive, a marketing executive, an owner manager, someone who might not be frontline sales, but looking to bring on the first, the second, the third to professionalize their team.
Yeah.
I think that there's maybe, I don't know if it's a misconception, but you mentioned just now the idea of the person on the street. And in your book, I had to laugh because you write about Groundhog's Day. I just watched it last week with my daughter. My 18-year-old daughter and I'm going through all of these films with her from the 80s and the 90s, and I'm trying to introduce her to some great films. So we go through Groundhog's Day, and of course, there's that character, right?
Bill Ned Ryerson.
Oh, Dad. And he's like, Phil? If you haven't watched in a while, the idea is that Bill Murray's character is stuck on a loop the same day every day. Every day he has to run into an old classmate who happens to sell insurance. I watched this scene and I watched him. And if you know what I'm talking about, he comes in super hot, super aggressive, and he just will not let up. And he's like, Phil, do you have life insurance? And I'm doing this, and how's great? And let's do this, and let's do lunch. And so it's funny though, because you pointed out like, well, what happens to this character? He gets punched in the face. But if I'm thinking as a business owner and I'm thinking about my sales team, that's what I want. I say I don't. But what I really do is I really do want a whole group of people who are hungry, who will get the bite on the line, who will not let up, who will chase people down. I don't want to come across as slimy. I don't want to come across as overly aggressive. So so now I'm talking out of both sides. And so help me understand why this is, because I've heard this from many of our clients. I've heard this from colleagues. I've heard this from other business owners. We don't want to pressure people, but frankly, if push came to shove, we probably want a bunch of Neds on our team, don't we?
Yeah, listen, I love someone who's got a high achievement drive, right? Lots of energy. We actually talk about that, right? The goal clarity and achievement drive are indicators of success. We need that. But how you execute it matters, of course. And so showing up and put that energy in the places that it matters. Put that energy into your research. Put that energy into being courageous and bold to initiate a conversation. But when you are in that conversation, how you engage really does make the difference. For sure, walk up, engage, knock on the door, make the call, send the email, whatever that is to create that moment. But when you get that moment, what are you there for? Are you there to serve your needs and to get something across the line? Or are you there to genuinely surface the potential of a need? See, here's the thing. Customers, what they really need help with is understanding their needs. When people really understand what their needs are, they're compelled to find solutions to those needs. The compulsion to buy is theirs. The urgency to buy is driven from the customer when they have a clear understanding of the significance and intensity of their need. There's energy to buy. And we can see that, right? Anytime you have, if you run out of milk or if you're in the middle of something and you have a missing part, there's an urgency to go find that, fill that need, and then complete that project or whatever that is. And so the pressure to buy comes from the customer rather than from the salesperson. Creating an understanding of what that need is and the necessity or the urgency or the value of solving that need is part of what we do as salespeople. And so by engaging and asking better questions, by creating moments of discovery, by us finding out what's really important to somebody, right? Use the Ned Ryerson example for a moment. If Ned had asked a couple of really smart questions, hey, Phil, we're in this moment. Tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me what's important to you. Tell me just a couple of things that extracted some awareness. Maybe there's something that could have been offered that was valuable, but the pressure to buy actually comes from the buyer, not from the salesperson.
Okay, so don't pressure people to buy. I think Ned may have screwed up a little bit by pressing him to sign a contract right there on the street. But, part of your book does this really amazing job of breaking down 5 self-beliefs. And these are the beliefs that are required to execute well in any kind of sales role. And we're going to get into the self-beliefs in a second. But before we do, if the real pressure to buy comes from our customers, how do we balance giving them the space they need to make their own decisions while we show up as a really kind of confident problem solver? Because I think most buyers actually still want that extra spark. Like they like the energy. They want the guidance. They even want a bit of a dog and pony show. They often want to be sold to. And so how do we balance this?
I think the question is really interesting because we talk about authenticity, right? We talk about product knowledge. We talk about the idea of showing up and being genuine. That comes from inside, right? I want someone who cares about getting me the right solution, not just selling me something for the sake of selling, but getting me the right solution. That means I want to be able to trust that they know what they're talking about. I need that person to be a more professional in their particular vein of knowledge than I am. Otherwise, why do I need them, right? If I can do all the research, if I have all the knowledge, I don't need that person. I want my sales professional to be just that, a professional and knowledgeable in the space. I also want them to bring to me some discovery that I can't get on my own, right? Ask me that question. I think we've all had that experience where we, kind of fixated in our mind down one track, and you find that individual who just takes you a step back and says, well, think about this, or what about this, or how would you handle this, or how does this situation impact you? And you have that V8 moment where you go, oh, I didn't even see that. I don't understand it. Oh, that's what I really am trying to address, not this other thing that I was sort of stuck on. And so I do want my sales partner in this to take me on that discovery journey and find out what's important to me and create that discovery in me. So yes, I do. And I certainly want them, you said, to puff me up and things like that. I want that to be a good experience for me. We have a saying that everyone has a right to buy the way they want to buy, not necessarily the way somebody else wants to sell. And think about that. We each have our own biases. Some of us like lots of information. Some of us like lots of relationship. Some of us make quick decisions. And if it's the wrong decision, we'll make another decision. No big deal. Others of us want to make one decision and we want it to be the right decision. And so we'll take our time and we'll do this. So every person has a desire to buy and really a right to buy the way that is most appropriate and fitting for them. How do we get our salespeople to identify that, to tune into that very quickly and not patronize, but genuinely say, you know what? If you need more information, let me get it for you. But if you think you can make a quick decision on less, I'm okay with that. If you don't want me prying into relationship in your life, even though I'm a people person, that's perfectly fine. Let's get right down to business because that's an obstacle to you because that's too personal. Fantastic. Let me make this easy for you. I really believe the job of a sales professional is to make the buying experience easy. Speak my language. Take the time. Ask me the right questions. Get me into that moment of discovery. I'll go where you want me to go if I feel it's compelling, but your job is to help me get there. And yes, I want you to be knowledgeable. I also want you to be adaptable.
Okay, so that's what's expected when you're in the room. But what are top performers doing before they ever even get into the room?
I'm a real believer that, beliefs drive behavior. what I believe about myself as a salesperson, what do I really believe my job is, and who I am and my own abilities. And do I feel like I'm doing something that's consistent with who I want to be as an individual, right? My values, all those things. What happens before I even engage the customer, there it translates into how I engage that prospect or customer, and the energy I bring to that, the authenticity that I bring to that, the creativity that I bring to that. Because I might show up and I may have a tremendous amount of knowledge, but it's all rote, right? I have to be present and genuinely interested. I say often, some of the best salespeople I've ever encountered are genuinely curious, right? They have this sort of curious intensity to understand what's going on with you in your particular situation, and how can I figure out what connects the dots for you in this way. And there's this energy and curiosity. And sure, I may hear in the first one or two quick answers what the solution is ultimately going to be. I'm like, oh yeah, I've done this 100 times, I could get there. But you touched on it. I run the risk of outrunning my customer or prospect in their discovery of that if I just go and start offering solutions in that. And so my job is to engage them and, again, make it easy. Show up. When I lose that energy, it falls flat, right? I'm not there and I'm not doing the job that I need to for my customer in that way.
So you write in the book, to be successful in sales, you need to convince people. We've just been speaking about that. But first, you need to convince yourself. And to do that, you need to know why you're selling. But there are 5 self-beliefs that I imagine can destroy a sales career. If you don't, I don't know if we need all of these perfectly lined up, and I would let you speak to that. But the 5 beliefs are your view of selling, your view of abilities, your values, your commitment to activities, and your belief in product. What are these? What do they mean? How do they affect us as salespeople? How do they affect our sales teams?
Yeah, I think these are essential. We've been doing this for over 50 years, and we've trained sales professionals literally all over the world. I mean, millions of people who've been through, and these are things that we have extracted over time. And I think they are essential. And maybe they're not all perfectly in alignment all the time, but they're indicators of how effective we're going to be. View of selling. What do I really believe the sales profession is? To me, selling is really identifying needs people have, meeting those needs, creating value in the process of doing so, and maybe you even develop some relationship along the way. But if you can identify needs and meet needs and create value, then that's selling. It might be the definition of service as well, but that is really all, it's bringing people along and meeting needs they have. So lots of people misidentify or misdefine this. And some of this, though, is rooted in what do I believe that I'm bringing to the equation. And I'll give you just a little backstory here. I have 10 children, right? I got a full household. Fantastic. But I get to watch kids do kid things all the time. And think about this. When you were a kid, what did you spend a lot of time doing? Of course, we play and but kids have great imaginations, and they also project themselves into certain characters or into certain futures. My kids, they run around, they dress up, they play, whatever it is. How many of us, and think what do kids do, right? They did doctors and lawyers and firemen and army people or whatever. How many of us that are in sales today played salesperson as a kid, right? Did we project ourselves into that? What's that sort of aspirational, imaginary future for us? I ask this all the time in meetings and keynotes and things like that. And no hands go up, or one or two, right? Because we don't have that sort of mental imagination to be solving problems for people in a sales capacity as a kid. And then it progresses. I ask, well, when you went to school, did you get your higher education with the intent to be in sales? Did you go getting your first job trying to be a sales? And very gradually you get these hands coming up. Most people who are in sales really had no intention or aspiration to be in sales as part of a journey and career path. And yet somehow they ended up in sales.
And I'm guessing here's the vast majority that they wanted the ability to work with autonomy. They wanted to make a lot more money, and they naturally are the type of people who aren't afraid to just put themselves out there.
It's all kinds of reasons. Some people say, look, I see that guy over there driving this car or having this, and I want that, income. Some want autonomy. Many, in fact, I would almost say a majority are in some ways put into the role. Someone along the way said, you should be in sales, or I think you've got an opportunity. Let's try this. I think a disproportionate number of people get put into sales rather than necessarily choose sales. But what does that do to the psyche of the individual that gets into sales? What's the difference between saying, I do sales and I am a salesperson, right? That there's this ownership that comes along that says, look, I believe that what I do is necessary. I connect need with solutions. And there are people out there who need me and they just don't know it yet. They just haven't engaged me yet. There's this void that I have to go fill because there's an urgency in me to get out there and connect solutions to needs. Is that my view of selling? Do I really believe that what we call sales is a noble profession, that there's something inherently valuable to what I do? Or am I just taking up space? And so that's a critical mental shift that a lot of people have to, and you see it all the time. People equivocate, they put various names and titles on the roles. I'm an account manager. I'm this. And I don't really care what you call the role. It's what you believe about the role. View of selling is a really significant factor in how I show up. And it might not be that I don't do the daily activities, but at some point it's going to trip me up. At some point, I won't ask that important question because I don't want to come across as that person, or I won't make that call to that individual with the right level of initiative or energy, and it'll hold me back. Or I'll get right up the line and I'll say, hey, so glad we had a chance to talk. Let me know if you're interested in doing something, because I didn't ask or I didn't give an opportunity for a decision, because somewhere in my mind, I've self-regulated back because all I am is doing sales. I'm not a sales professional. I don't own it as an identity, like internalized identity.
This is really good. This is really good because I have literally said, I think last week, hey, you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here if and when you need me. And I think these types of conversations that I'm even having is because for me as an agency owner, sales is one part of what I'm responsible for. And it's only a certain type of relationship, a certain type of deal, a certain type of sale. I'm not worried about making quota or hitting my numbers or even the volume that I expect of a salesperson. So I do tend to keep things fast and loose because I have a full day ahead of me too. So buy, don't buy, whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm here to help. And if you don't need me, but it's because I have not required myself, even in my role as an owner operator, to say in this conversation, I have to take off my CEO hat. I have to put on my salesperson hat. And I have to remember the fact that in this conversation, yes, I'll follow all of those steps, add value, scope, problem solve, all those things. But at a certain point in this conversation, I am a salesperson and I'm required to drive this forward to the next step. I'm required to ask for the next step. I'm required to move forward. Like there's little subtleties here that I didn't even realize.
And you think about this, Mark, we have a job to do, right? Our job is to represent our organization and to advance its well-being. Salespeople, I say, are the tip of the spear. We go out and we make things happen in the market. That's different than order taking. Right? Order taking is when the market comes to us and says, we have a need. Can you solve it? Fantastic. And we need that. Salespeople go into the market and they cultivate discovery of need so that we can offer solutions to meet that need. That is the energy that shows up and makes something happen. Why is that important? Because yes, I'm helping that potential prospect get better value that they're not even aware of today. And I want to drill into that a little bit more in a second. But what is the other part of the equation? Everyone behind me in the organization relies on me doing that because, and this is why I think sales is a noble profession, is because no one has a job. Nobody back behind me has a job until a sale is made. Now, that's a pretty heavy weight, but that is also a pretty exciting thing because I do the hard work, and everybody in the organization might do essential work, hard work. But salespeople, we go out and do hard work to create opportunity so that everyone else gets the benefit of that. And we all get to advance in the value of that sales activity. And so when I'm with a customer, if I've done my job really well, if I've asked smart questions, I've created value, an understanding of value, and there's an agreement that there is a need to be met, I have an obligation as a sales professional to everybody, both my prospect and the people I work for, to get to a moment of decision, to bring that sales discussion to the point that I say, if all of this stuff is valuable, I want to at least give you an opportunity to move forward or not in this moment if it's of value. Now, it's perfectly reasonable for that person to go, I need a night to sleep on it, right? Some people, that's the better way for them to make decisions, or I need to involve other people, or let me check with budgets or things. Fine. But as a sales professional, I want to give them an opportunity to engage the relationship with me, and I have a responsibility to do that. Not in a pushy way, but in a genuine way. All these things make sense to you. Tell me, where are we at this stage? What do you think your next step is with us? How can we best serve you in making a decision? Right? That's just part of the role of a salesperson. But what it does is it reflects on, what do I believe selling is? Secondly, what do I believe my abilities are? That's the second part of the equation. What are my view? Do I have a process to follow? Do I have skills to ask the right questions or to know where I am in the sales equation? Do I understand a step-by-step professional model of engagement, a sales model? View of my abilities. The third is values. Am I doing something that is ethically consistent or morally consistent with who I want to be? Unfortunately, many of us have worked for organizations that we felt at times asked us to do things that are inconsistent with who we want to be as individuals or a boss, right? And so we're in dissonance. We're out of congruence in that, and it impacts our productivity. That's the third piece of the equation. The fourth piece of the equation is commitment to activities. Do I know the right activities, right? Do I do the preparation? Do I go ahead? Do I make the right kinds of, there's a difference between being busy and being productive. Do I have a commitment to the right activities, and do I do them consistently, or do I get easily distracted? Do I compromise productivity with just feeling like I've been busy? And the fifth piece of that, sorry, is belief in product. Do I believe the product and service that I represent is actually valuable to my customer? Now, what belief in product is interesting because what it doesn't say, I think sometimes is important than what it does, right? I believe that my product or service provides value to our customers. And I need to include myself in that because my customers buying me sometimes as much as they're buying, their trust, their belief in me. What that doesn't say is I believe my product or service is the most innovative or the cheapest or the most accessible. It's that it brings value. If the value equation tips, if they get at least equal or greater benefit for the cost they incur, that's value. And as a sales professional, I need to take confidence in that because sometimes we talk ourselves out of things, right? Operations screwed up such and such, or I said we were going to do this for the customer, and the next time they called somebody, they got a bad experience, or we didn't treat them well, or whatever. And that begins to tamp down my ability to go out and still be confident and enthusiastic about the products. So I have to work through all these things. Those 5 areas in balance mean that I can be really productive. Any one of those 5 areas out of balance creates drag. And all of a sudden I have to really work through those to show up and be productive. And that's where coaching comes in. That's why in the book we talk to the sales leader, because sometimes we can't self-identify those areas. Sometimes we need a coach looking at us and going, hey, that was a great sales call all the way up into the point that you didn't ask for anything. Why was that? And then you dig into and you find out it's probably one of these areas.
I want to zero in on the belief in product piece for a minute if we can, because I see this often with salespeople or sales team where they're not like really bought into things. And it's not usually because the product is garbage or the service is garbage. That's like obvious. Sometimes it's more subtle. It's when a salesperson is selling in a highly price sensitive or commoditized market. It's when operations tends to drop the ball on delivery, and it makes them look bad, makes a salesperson look bad to their clients. Or when they see bad or negative reviews online that they aren't sure how to address and the company doesn't seem to be addressing the problems. And so owning a strategy firm and helping companies with strategy, we often come in and we work on positioning and differentiation and values and sales stories, and we do all this stuff to make them stand out and be unique. And I found that often actually gets more buy-in from the team, more excitement from the team with this hope that we can go to market with something different, far more than has a bigger impact than scripts, sales scripts or sales techniques I feel ever has. But I'm curious, like what, in your experience, what happens when salespeople are struggling with this belief? They just don't believe in the product or the service. And how do you help them reconnect with what's going to make their product, their service genuinely valuable to the customer?
I think what you do is essential, right? You have to first believe in your product. Yeah, that's the first sale that you make, right? To yourself, to your sales team. In every business struggles, right? It's ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're excellent in one area and then that drops off. You lose people, markets change. So there is absolutely an essential need for tapping into that and bringing belief into the sales team themselves. But balancing that with, I don't just show up and talk about the features and benefits. I have to make sure that those really connect to needs that my customer or prospect have. And if I can do that, the smart salesperson is able to extract out of the customer the thing that either they know or don't know is important to them and connect value in that product or service that they're offering. It's not always apparent because we talk about features and benefits and value and things like that. And so often we craft those from our side of the equation. Well, of course, this should be important to you, right? It's got X, Y, and Z, or it's faster this, or it's more efficient than that, or whatever. But we miss the opportunity to engage in connecting just the right value proposition to our customer. So often when we get in, especially in the business to business sales environment, right? And I love this space because it's part of the value chain that makes things happen in the economy. But too often when we talk to business salespeople, here's what they do. They sell to their customer, right? The transaction ends at their customer. And in some ways, those salespeople believe that what the value they bring is this thing that they give to their customer. What they miss is that the only reason that customer is willing to talk to them is because something they do allows them to serve their customer. So what you're doing is you're not selling to the customer. We need to sell through our customers to their customers. It is a real shift in the way we think about things. And so whatever products and service value benefits, all of that you're trying to bring awareness to them, we've got to make sure that it connects through their business and really provides value downstream in the chain to allow them to do what they do, and that is serve their customers. They exist because they serve their customers. We only exist because we help them accomplish that. Otherwise, they have no reason to talk to us. And if we miss that, if we only sell to the transaction, we will be irrelevant to them. Or somebody else who does sell through them to their customers will be more valuable to them because they engage the right kinds of issues and solve the right kinds of challenges.
So if you can, I have a few rapid fire questions I would love to shoot your way. Are you up for that?
Absolutely.
There are lots of organizations that have sold through relationships or sold the old school way, and the easy, fast way of selling in the past just isn't working today. What would be your number one piece of advice for people to move from the old school way of selling to what you're suggesting through Listen to Sell?
I think first of all, you've got to have a process and discipline, right? Professionalism means that I'm not just showing up every day and hoping, right? I have process, I have organization, I have commitment activities, and so knowing what we do well and then having a game plan for doing it and executing it actually solves a lot of problems, right? I'm not just shooting in the dark. I'm not just hoping. I show up every day and I'm engaged in doing the work of the business. The second thing is, I think there are real ways for us to leverage exposure. I'm a big proponent of creative networking and finding ways to get in front of people that, that aren't necessarily conventional, but sometimes it just means being courageous. Let's have the energy to just be courageous to engage. Too often, salespeople and sales teams don't fully engaged, they self-regulate. So I think that's part of the expectation is I get prepared, which enables me, but then I also need a good sales coach, right? Too many organizations hire salespeople or they hire people they think are experienced and they go get them, boy, have at it. And what they don't do is they don't intentionally engage in the coaching and nurturing of those individuals and even the highest performers. In fact, I would suggest that your best performers need coaching, maybe need the best coaching. They need somebody who's engaged, who's paying attention, who's elevating. You're going to get more out of those folks. Coaching is essential, right? Sales management, sales leadership is essential to doing that. And I think that's a lot of times where I find organizations that have been successful along the way, but they're not accelerating. It's sometimes they're not in the right markets. Sometimes they don't have the right channels. Sometimes they're not prospecting well. Almost all of the time, there's not a coach or there's not a sales leader who is driving the focus and the activity and the engagement and the individuals to show up every day and be wholly present in doing the role. I think that's where I would put my energy is finding the right sales leaders to make those things happen.
So how can marketing teams better support this approach? Because obviously marketing is responsible for generating the opportunity. It's handed over to sales and there's tension there. But how can marketing teams better support our sales teams with the listen to sell approach?
Yeah, to me, sales and marketing they're linked in such an intimate way. It's not throwing this over the fence to the other. And if sales and marketing don't have common objectives, if they don't understand the individual types of customers and are flexible to that, they're not going to work very well together. So I think it's important for marketing to understand what actually happens in a live sales dialogue. I mean, I think that's important. It's also important for sales to understand that marketing creates the kind of exposure and the messaging that gets attention at times. And so working together is essential. But I think each needs to know that, their roles don't work independent of the other. They work absolutely in concert with one another. And so I don't see many successful organizations that don't have sales and marketing kind of as a joint part of business success.
We're seeing at a HubSpot event, I was at Inbound, I think in 2019 before COVID, and I heard a speaker talk about the fact that they had looked at what they could do to improve conversions. And they looked at testing like ad colors and it saw a small lift, I don't know, 2%, let's say. And they're like, well, let's test messaging. And that saw a little larger lift. And they went through all the stuff. Let's test ad placement. Let's test targeting. And then it came to let's ensure that sales and marketing are working in tandem. And it was like a 3,500% increase. Right? It was like everything that we could do to to increase sales came down to like sales and marketing just working a lot closer together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's exactly on point.
Okay, so I'm curious. The book has been out now for a year, and in my experience, authors always go like, "Oh man, this is the question that I can't believe this is the thing that keeps coming up," or "Oh, like now that it's been a year, I actually wish I could go back and rewrite this or clarify that." Now that the book's been out for a year, what is that thing for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we reflect on that all the time. Did we say the right things? Is it resonating with the audience? Unfortunately, I think it has resonated with the audience. We're really happy with that. But some things have emerged. Certainly, that whole congruence model, right? The identity, the self-belief resonates with people. But what I think we spend a lot of time on is converting energy to activity. And some of that energy is in the preparation phase. I think this is the area that we probably could continue to concentrate on is how do I show up and continue to maintain a high level of engagement and professionalism? That how many salespeople do you know? And I'll raise my hand because I'm guilty of it too, who get good at what we do. And then we show up and think we can handle whatever comes our way. And we don't even take that 3-minute or 5-minute preparation to go, what do I know? Could I pull my resources in? Could it make me better in this moment if I just put myself to some objective? What's the simple objective of this call? And we find ourselves wandering and meandering and hoping, and little bits of preparation go a long way to getting the results that we want. And so I think that's an area that has gotten some attention. And I would probably put more attention to and augment that with the continuing changing landscape of AI and the other tools and things that are going along like that.
I've been speaking of Derek Roberts, who is the co-author of Listen to Sell: How Your Mindset, Skill Set, and Human Connections Unlock Sales Performance. My final question for you, I love to finish. My final question, what would be your number one tip to help us sell more?
You're limiting me to one.
I am.
Oh, it's an interesting question, right? What is the one tip if you could zero it down into one thing? I think it's this, none of us are self-made or self-sustaining individuals. Eventually, we will run out of our own energy. We will burn out. We will become self-limited by our knowledge individually. So I think that the number one tip that I would have for anybody who wants to be successful in sales is find a great sales coach, or find someone around you who can look at you from the outside and ask you smarter questions, or get access to resources that challenge you to think differently. That's one of the reasons in the book we wrote at the end of every chapter a coaching corner to ask those kinds of questions, right? To put you in that discovery moment. If you don't have an external coach, at least read what a coach might be asking you. I think that's the clear differentiator for some of the best performers.
That was Derek Roberts, sales leadership expert and co-author of Listen to Sell: How Your Mindset, Skill Set, and Human Connections Unlock Sales Performance. Before we go, I want to thank you for listening. If you're looking to build a sales team that actually believes in what they're selling and can connect with customers on a deeper level, I highly recommend Derek's book. The 5 self-belief framework that he shared today is actually just one part of what makes this book so valuable. And we didn't have time to get into it really in this episode, but within the book, there are 10 techniques for outstanding preparation that I believe are a must read. And I was hoping, frankly, if we had a 4-hour podcast episode, we can get into all this stuff, but it's all there in the book. Now, you can find Listen to Sell everywhere books are sold. You can learn more about Derek's work over at robertsbusinessgroup.com or integritysolutions.com. Now, if you found today's episode valuable, I would love to hear from you. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. And if this is your first time listening, I hope you'll check out a few more episodes, maybe even consider subscribing. Because on the How to Sell More podcast every week, we share fresh sales and marketing ideas. We share proven strategies from industry experts and seasoned entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Mark Drager. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you in the next one.